The Guardian newsletter had a real good article talking about Ireland's corporate tax rise to see if tech companies will leave Dublin. And it looks like Ireland has basically thrown in the towel. And, they went from 12.5% corporate tax rate to 15%. We'll see how many companies leave over 2.5% corporate tax rate. The problem with this, usually what happens is they start off inch by inch, and then like inch by inch is a cinch, and I think that's what's going to happen here. The OECD is putting pressure on them, then they give in, they'll come back again, put more pressure on them, they'll gradually start raising, and what they'll end up doing is losing all that business from these tech companies, which is just stupid. It's incredible, the stupidity of this, but this is the way they think. But anyway, analysts question, if they went on to say in this article, if Dublin's reputation as a leading tech hub could be undermined by the new 15% tax rate. We'll see what happens on that. They talked about in the article just 10 years ago, Dublin was nicknamed the Silicon Valley's home from home, with tech superstars including like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk querying up to snap up office space, availing themselves of local Irish hospitality and low tax. But while the decision of Google, Facebook, Yahoo, LinkedIn, eBay, Amazon, and more recently TikTok to locate their European headquarters in the Irish capital helped cement its reputation as one of the region's leading tech hubs, questions are now being asked whether they're going to stay. Now, early this month, Ireland signed up to landmark reforms for a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15%. And like I say, it was up from 12.5% set by Dublin in the biggest shifts for the country's tax system in almost 20 years. Also, folks, if you want to legally get your income taxes to zero, how to get a second passport as quick as 45 days, do three things. Hit the subscribe button on the right of your screen right here, and the notification button next to that subscribe button. And number two is I would like to hear from you. If you got a question or comment, just put it below. And number three is go to our website, www.citizenshipquickly.com, and ask for some help. Now, some analysts have argued that the nation's economic model could be badly undermined, while the Irish Finance Minister, Pascal Donoghue, said earlier this year that up to $2 billion to $1.7 billion a year in tax revenue could be lost by 2025. This is the thing is, they think they're going to get more tax dollars. They'll probably end up losing more because some of these companies are going to probably just pack up their bags and go. There are places you can actually get zero tax. However, there are hopes the changes might not prove as existential as they first seem. Now, in the short to medium term, they're stating here that no, there won't be an exodus. The change from 12.5% to 15% is not that significant, said Seamus Coffey, an economist at University of College Cork and former chair of the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council. Now, Ireland had played hardball in the global tax talks taking place between 140 countries at the OECD in Paris, following almost a decade of failure among world leaders to agree on reforms that would equip the taxation regime for the digital age. Now, Dublin refused to join an accord early this year and only relented earlier this month at the 11th hour of negotiations after securing a key concession. Earlier plans calling for a minimum rate of at least 15% were dropped, giving the government more certainty that would not be ratcheted higher in the future. However, the reality is that many big tech firms never paid the 12.5% to begin with. That was headline set by Ireland. A Bloomberg investigation in 2010 showed how Google had cut its overseas tax rate to just 2.4%, using the aggressive avoidance scheme dubbed the double Irish Dutch sandwich to effectively shuffle revenues made across Europe offshore to places like Bermuda, where the tax rate was zero. Now, these schemes were outlawed in 2015, giving companies 5 years notice to comply. Now, however, with such arrangements undoubtedly helped attract Google and Facebook to Ireland in the 90s. They were merely the latest in a wave of more than 1,500 foreign firms, 800 of them American, lured in by the low tax ethos of the country's Industrial Development Agency since its foundation in 1949. Now, before then, They went on to say that IBM, Intel, Pfizer, and Apple were shown the red carpet. For at least a decade, Allegan has been making the world's supply of Botox in West Point County, Mayo, on the country's windswept Atlantic coast. Now, the low tax rate started in the 1960s at 0 and then went to 10%, said Coffey. The point of it was never to generate corporate tax revenue, but to use effectively low corporate tax to attract the companies to set up in Ireland and then let them build big factories and facilities. And then we've got the employment. Well, they're destroying that, because people are going to get probably laid off from this. They don't realize that when you start raising taxes, you end up killing your tax revenue because people get laid off, and then their tax revenue is laid off because they got laid off. There are some other factors tempting the multinationals. Chinese owned TikTok set up its Dublin headquarters in 2018, long after the writing was on the wall for the tax avoidance loophole. Now, young companies are focusing on things that will either kill them or help them scale in the near future. Now, corporate tax isn't one of them, says Stephen McIntyre, former head of Twitter in Ireland and a partner in Frontline Ventures, a venture capital firm in Dublin and London set up to help U.S. tech firms expand in Europe. Now, Joe Biden and the OECD want to promote this idea of competing on grounds other than tax, viewing the reforms as ending the race to the bottom between countries. Now, when startups land in Europe, they care more about the hired, experienced people and acquiring customers. They also like places where it's easy to do business, McIntyre added. Now, he said that for Ireland, there are cultural ties to the U.S. English language proficiency is widespread, and employment law makes it easy to hire and fire people. Now, corporate tax is a top 10 issue, but not a top 5 issue. Now, if Google's historic use of schemes to transfer taxable revenue offshore gave Ireland a reputation as somewhere tax could be avoided, the annual cash booked by the Irish in Chequer paints a different picture. Now, the government's budget watchdog has warned that just 10 companies accounted for 56% of the net corporate tax receipts in 2019, highlighting the risk from the OECD plan. Yeah, all they need is a few of these companies to actually move out, and they're going to end up probably getting less taxes than if they just left it alone. That they can't think that way. Most government officials are just too dumb to figure that out. One former senior Irish tax official estimates about 30% of Ireland's corporate tax comes from just 3 companies: Microsoft, then Apple, and Pfizer. As much as 40% comes from Microsoft and Apple, he said. Now, he agrees with Coffey that the tax hike will not be a cliff edge, but he says companies like Microsoft will be years ahead of the curve. They don't pay their tax councils more than $1 million, basically to sit on their backsides. They're very clever. These companies will have their plans and strategies in place for years, said the source. Now, one danger for Ireland is that the corporate tax revenues could go further. In the OECD talks this summer, sources said that France and Germany were pushing for a higher global minimum tax rate. These guys are not happy unless you just give up all your friggin' money. But they talked about here with the subtext to forge closer economic integration by limiting tax competition across the 27-member bloc. Now, Donoghue recently said that he's been assured by the elimination of at least that this would not be an issue for years to come. Now, some EU countries, including Ireland, Hungary, and Estonia, have drawn the ear of the neighbors for setting low headline corporate tax rates, reflected in the bitter dispute between Dublin and Brussels over $13 billion in taxes allegedly owed by Apple. Now, across the 37-member OECD, the average headline corporate tax rate's around 23%. Coffey believes that France's area is more to do with the per capita corporate tax rate in Ireland. It's double and heading towards triple that of France and Germany. Now, most of the corporation tax is paid by American companies in Ireland. You can imagine in France if it's by French companies. He said a bigger danger is the prospect that the OECD may push to force companies to pay tax in their countries of activity. This autumn's reform was all about eliminating offshoring. Now, the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council has estimated that about $5 billion in annual corporate tax receipts relates to excess activities that may not have occurred in Ireland. Now, Coffey said that Irish corporate tax income has tripled in the past 7 years, from about $4.5 billion to $14 billion, and helped by a huge injection from U.S. companies. But if they arise in such an unexplained fashion, then there's also the potential for them to fall in a similarly unexplained fashion. But, government officials just can't figure this stuff out. They don't realize a lot of times they're going to end up getting a lot less tax revenue from this. Anyway, folks, if you got a question or comment, just put it below. And also would like to hear from you on this. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the right of your screen right here and the notification bell next to that subscribe button. And folks, if you want to get your taxes legally to zero, how to get a second passport as quick as 45 days, go to our website, www.citizenshipquickly.com. We got over 500 YouTube videos. You need to hit that subscribe button so you can get all these videos automatically. And folks, if you're looking to get the donation option, remember with St. Kitts, it's going up $45,000 unless the government changes things as of January the 1st. And we've got 2 sellers also that are actually picking up the government fees. One of them is closing that out end of this month. So if you want the government fees, your background check fees, and also your legal fees paid for, this is an incredible option going on during this coronavirus period. And I'll look forward to talking to you on the next video. Take care.